What's up? It's Sarah, Be Love in the house, and I'm making this video on how I almost joined a cult. Yep. I almost joined a cult, guys, and this is like it's a pretty awesome cult, but I just there was things I liked about the discipline. I had been to military school, I actually like when there's order and discipline. But the one thing that I could not grasp was and one characteristic of a cult is it cuts people off from God and says you have to go through this church only to get to God. And I do believe that you have to go through Christ to get to God, but I don't believe I have to go to Christ through the way that the International Church of Christ says I have to get to Christ. And I say that because if you watch my other testimony video, I've had a long walk with God. I've been walking with God since miracles happened to me on New Year's Eve 2008. And yes, I'm sick right now. I'm out of breath and breathing, but I'm making this video anyways. I'm still going to sales class, and I'm still got my Bible studies going. So, yeah, whatever. Can't stop, won't stop. But here we go. We're diving into why I'm making this video for people that have asked me about this. And why I think that this church is a cult, because there are a lot of good things about it. Let me just say, here's the good things about it. These are good things that I'm going to take note in my life anyways. They're diligent about studying the Bible. Well, at least when you go through all the Bible studies. After you go through all the Bible studies, I kind of felt like I was on my own. But when they're getting you into the church, there's a lot of attention. So the focus on studying the Bible. They have really awesome purity values, except you can't marry outside the church. And, yeah, that's one thing. You have to marry another ICC member, ICOC member, ICC member. And but they arrange it in a nice way, because sometimes I feel man, I'm not, doing this correctly, or the way that my Christian books read, how am I supposed to uphold these values? So that church does uphold some good values in that area. I was inviting a ton of people to church, but then again, what I could not come to terms with was and which is also characteristic of a cult, is they say you can't get to God unless you go through us. You have to get to us to get to God. And not to be able to get to God on your own. So that's what I did have a problem with, was you had to get to God through the church. I couldn't study the Bible and come to this conclusion. You can't baptize yourself. And in fact, if you are not baptized, you are going to hell. And even though I had already been baptized, I wasn't baptized in a particular way. And so they told me, after being super loyal, I would die for Jesus loyal. I've been following him since New Year's Eve 2008. I was radically healed of drugs and alcohol. I have other videos about my testimony, and now all of a sudden they're telling me I was never walking with Christ and I'm going to hell. I was what? I was dunk me right now. I got a tub. Baptize me if that's what I need to do to go to heaven. And I didn't really consider leaving the church until somebody had sent me the videos that are at the end of this video, and I'm including them in this video. So you can take a look at those after I'm done speaking. I'll tell you my story for another couple minutes, and then you can check out these videos on the ICC. Yeah, basically, long story short, so a couple things that were interesting about this church is baptism was required, even though it's already baptized, and you have to be a disciple, baptized into a body of believers, not just a regular baptism. So I was what if a man in prison dies and he can't be water baptized? Water baptized, fully submerged water baptized, not Holy Spirit baptized. So they're well, if God would make a way for him to get water baptized, or that's on God. And I was I don't know, it seems religious, a Pharisee would say oh, you have to have water baptism. And then, like, also, it's like you have to have a discipler. So, like, I kind of felt, like, downgraded in my faith almost. Like, downgraded, like, and you have to have somebody from the church, like, overseeing you. And, like, stuff didn't get, like, crazy funky with me. I just left after I saw, like, how it could get crazy funky in the videos at the end of this. Like, I'm still cool with the girls there. I just know that, like, they probably won't want to talk to me because I don't believe the same thing. And, like I was like, hey, do you want to collaborate on, like, these Christian video projects I'm doing? Well, not really, because I don't know if you believe the same thing as I do. So I was like, what is this exactly that you believe? And, like, why am I not a part of that? Even though I've, like, worked my whole life to be, like, open to Jesus and learning everything I can about that. So anyways, in the videos it talks about how, like, the disciplers can get, like, controlling. Like, that's what freaked me out. Like, if I start to want to take a job, they might say no, and then I'd be like, yo, this is not right. So anyways, it's stuff like that where it's, like, interesting. But anyways, okay, so confession of sin. Like, I did is convince that this is hard because, like, disciplers are good. You know, if you have somebody that's discipling you, like, I always want to find other women in the faith, like, people to mentor me, teach me, guide me, in things that I want to know about, either spiritually or emotionally, or like film. If I can find somebody that's, like, farther than me artistically, like, I want to be discipled, I want to be taught these things. So that's good, but, like, to have somebody control in, like, a bad way, that's what's scary. So that's what the videos talked about, like, discipling gone wrong with this church. Confession of sin. I did confess sin, and I think confession of sin is good, you know, because you feel close to people that, you know, you confess your sin to, but also it's really to feel close to God. And that's why, like, there's this thing where the church is, like, super nice to you called, like, love bombing, and I was like, oh my gosh, they totally, like, love bombed me. And then I was like, am I being, like, manipulated? But and then they talk about your confession of sin that can be used against you. So that's what I was also nervous about, that it might be used against me. And then also it's like they're saying that, like, they force you to bring people to church, and I was like, I wanted to bring people to church. I thought this was this great church that I had fellowship with, but now I'm like, I'm not gonna bring anybody here because I'm, like, very weary about it. And just because they judge me and told me I'm going to hell, it's like, it's hard for me to do that back, because I really don't feel like that's our place to, like, judge people. It's almost like before I was getting baptized and following Jesus, because, like, the Holy Spirit was, like, convicting me, and I was, like, self-motivated. And this time I got baptized because, like, of what other people were telling me, and, like, the fear that I was like, no, I don't want to go to hell. And I feel like it's, like, better to fall in love with Jesus than to, like, be scared of hell. So anyways, that was something. So yeah, like, I guess the videos that you'll see will talk about a lot about, like, how they press for you to bring a lot of people to church. Like, I mean, they were cool with me. Like, after your Bible studies, they're like, which I was really enjoying the personal, like, in the house, like, Bible studies with people. It was like, which I really feel like God will use that to motivate me, because I would still love to have Bible studies with people. Just not, like, condemning people to hell, because I don't really feel like that's our job. We can lead people closer to Christ and follow the Bible, which I think is our job. But yeah, anyways, so yeah, yeah, I guess I'll just show you guys these videos. You can check it out. And yeah, like, I haven't been back there. I was like the night that I was showing these videos, I was ready to move in with the girls, and there's a couple guys that live here. It's a skateboard ministry. It's like a generally safe place that God has provided. I can afford the rent here in LA. And then, like, they're like, oh, you got to move in with women. It's not right that you're living with men. And I was like, you don't have to make me do that. Like, I agree with you. Like, I have that own conviction. And so I felt like I was being obedient to God to move in with them. And I was like, okay, God. And I prayed, and I felt a peace about it. But just like Abraham was, like, up on the thing ready to sacrifice Isaac, God didn't really want him to sacrifice Isaac. Like, God had a plan for Isaac. But he wanted to test Abraham's obedience. So I felt like in that sense, it was like I was being tested in my obedience. So, but then I was shown these videos. So take a look at these videos and let me know what you think. All right, God bless you. Bye.
We wanted to hear the ICC side of the story, so Fox Files traveled to Los Angeles, where the church is headquartered, to interview ICC spokesman Al Baird.
So all we're doing is trying to say, let's get back and be the church that Jesus started in the Bible.
The church moves in and takes the place of God, is essentially what happens. They move in, they start making all the rules and regulations.
Well, let's pray.
Our Bible study started with a brief prayer.
Dear Father in heaven, I love you so much.
And then quickly turned X-rated.
It's almost like, how would you feel if your dad was standing in the room while you're having sex?
ICC members pressured our Fox Files associate producers to confess every last detail of their sex lives.
Well, what do you mean fool around? I mean, or when you have sex, I mean, did you ever do oral sex?
Then the Bible leader gave examples of what we should be talking about.
There was this one time that he wanted me to have anal sex, and I did it, and I hated it. Or whatever.
We showed Mr. Baird our undercover tape of what the church calls the sin study.
Does that bother you? Does it make you uncomfortable at all that people aren't just being asked if they had committed fornication or adultery, but to give very personal, very specific details about that?
I don't know what you mean by specific details.
A discipler would not ask if you committed oral sex, if you committed anal sex. Details.
Not in the sense that you're talking about. We're not interested in prying inappropriately into people's lives. We want them to come to grips with what's going on in their life so they can deal with God.
Our two associate producers were called every day by ICC members and were warned their parents would accuse them of being in a cult.
Instead of being totally proud of you, they may get really weirded out or think you're a part of a cult or think you're being controlled.
God did this so that men would seek him.
According to the ICC, the Bible says the only true Christians are disciples. Everyone who joins the church must have a discipler or mentor. It was a point that was hammered home in our Bible study classes.
Basically, you have to be a disciple to be a Christian, to be saved.
Calvin Kwan, who was a member of the ICC at Cal State, says he knows the true meaning of discipling.
To me, discipling is really set up so that the leadership of the church will have someone to watch over every member. Every member gets watched over. It's like having someone looking over your shoulder 24 hours a day.
My discipler used to tell me to just follow advice blindly, and God will bless it.
Everyone needs a mentor.
Is that why relatively young people in the church can be disciplers for newer members?
Everyone needs someone to help them and encourage them. It's a matter of helping someone grow.
But listen to what they told our associate producers is the meaning of a disciple.
So a disciple, basically, you just obey.
And what sort of obedience did they want from our associate producer? They told her to be with God, she must break up with her boyfriend.
Go to God. You gotta cut it off completely. It's over. Andy's a memory, a distant, long memory.
It's one of the ICC's most strongly held beliefs not to date outside the group. But even courtship among ICC members is not what most people would call normal.
If I was discipling somebody and the person who I was discipling wants to start dating this girl in the church, that they would have to get permission from me.
And what's it like when you get permission? Just ask former member Lara Cottrell, who dated the same guy for 2 years.
During that period of time, we never kissed each other. We held hands. That was a big thing. And he was like, he'd fall into sin if he were to kiss me.
The big step was we were going to hold hands.
I've been able to be celibate for 7 years.
But why would intelligent college students do everything their discipler says? Because the Bible studies have taught them that if they don't, they're damned to hell.
Once I bought into it, I thought, well, either I follow them or I'm going to hell.
What about going to hell? Is that a phrase?
I can't remember the last time I told someone you're going to hell.
My family, my friends, everybody going to hell. Hurting big time. I mean, they made it graphic, too. They told me, hell, fire, pain.
According to ex-members, once the ICC has their disciples believing, they try to separate them from their families.
I've had to make decisions to put my relationship with God above my relationship with my mom.
John and Stony Esp know all about losing a daughter to the ICC.
She was just one of the joys of my life.
But joy turned to sadness after their daughter joined the ICC her freshman year at Montana State University.
I believe that this church has taken my daughter.
You can't believe the agony that we've gone through trying to figure out what our responsibility as a parent is. The grief that I have is over somehow not preparing my children for this possibility in their lives.
How often do you see that kind of problem where ultimately the church can divide parents and children?
Usually we see exactly the opposite. We work the very hardest that we can to keep people united.
John and Stony tried to keep their family united by bringing in a cult expert to try to convince Amy to leave the ICC.
She just wouldn't listen to us. Didn't want to listen, was afraid. Fear came over her face. She was afraid to listen. That was a pretty low point. Your daughter's running down the street, leaves her shoes behind. Mother's sitting here begging her to stay.
And even though it's been a few months since that's happened, it's something I'll never forget. I know she's old enough to leave home and make up her own mind, but I don't feel like she's making up her own mind.
When we come back, recruiting, how the ICC takes your mind and your money.
I've spent every dime I have for the church. I have no furniture to my own name.
As our hidden camera investigation into the International Churches of Christ continues, we found a group that would say most anything to get you to join and takes practically everything once you're in. Is the ICC a church or a cult? Former members say just look at their priorities.
I was given an ultimatum at one point, Sam, drop out of school. That's what you need to do.
I've never heard of anyone else give the advice you need to drop out of school. Quite the opposite. People are often encouraged to go to school.
ICC officials arranged for Fox Files to talk to some of their college members.
Why do you think so many people are calling this church a cult?
I don't know really how to answer that question because to me it's not.
For me, the church is the greatest thing I've come across.
I really just had a desire to live a life that would be pleasing to God.
I was on an academic scholarship to U of A, a pre-med student, and I was told by a leader that I had to become a communications major because it took less time.
Finals is no different of the time. The services is stop sharing your thing.
Ex-members say the ICC dominated their lives, with much of their time taken up with recruiting.
They tell you that if you're not fruitful, which means bringing somebody into the church, if you're not fruitful with new membership, then there's something wrong with your spiritual walk with God.
You invite people, anybody, everybody that you can.
That has got to be basically our purpose in life.
But even people who are not even members yet are out recruiting and bringing in.
To the extent that's true, they do it because it's spontaneous.
Spontaneous isn't exactly the way it happened with our two associate producers.
Like, have you been sharing your faith with people? No.
So, have you been inviting people to church and stuff?
That's your purpose, is to share your faith.
Think about the pressure of that. If I can't get somebody to come with me to this Bible study, then my eternal salvation is at stake.
It seems the ICC also bases salvation on the cash register ringing. Ex-disciples say they were pressured into giving at least 10% of what they made.
We keep track down to every single dollar, every single penny of every single member. The leadership knows exactly who's supposed to give what.
What about for other people who are encouraged to sell things to give more to the church?
There aren't many people that do that. But there are people that choose to do that, and it's personal choice.
I also sold every piece of furniture I had and every appliance and TV and whatever and gave that to the church.
Twice during our stay, we witnessed students handing over checks and money with one of the leaders counting it down to the very penny. And listen to this.
Because of the holiday season, you need to bring contribution for those next 3 weeks.
And what about their leader, Kip McKean? We don't know what he's giving, but he sure is getting a heck of a lot, including this nearly $500,000 home in L.A., which the ICC owns and provides him. For many, the pressures of recruiting, giving your money, shunning your family, and giving all your time to the ICC become too much. Many members finally leave.
When I walked away, the leader that I talked to told me that I was making an eternal decision. And I said, I know that. If it's this hard to go to heaven, then I'll go to hell.
Brandon says he's still recovering from his time with the ICC. He says he's suffering from a deep depression that he may never fully get over.
I may not look like damaged goods, but if you crack me open, it's pretty ugly. And trust me, I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. I wouldn't wish what I've been through on Kip McKean.
Or together we shall perish in its flames.
This is 2020. Tonight, is this a dynamic new church or religious quicksand?
I just wanted to escape so bad. I took a knife and I was scratching my wrist back and forth.
Thousands of people are drawn by its message of love, but some former members say it's brainwashing.
It's a mind control group that uses religion.
They say the secrets of your past are used against you.
I bet you're the kind of person that would even beat his child. How dare you do that?
And sometimes your future is threatened.
Said, God's going to destroy your life.
John Stossel investigates the tactics of one of the fastest growing churches in the country.
Not church policy to break people?
There's a forceful message in what they preach. Believe it, or else.
Plus, we're in touch, so you be in touch. We mean it. And our first story tonight came to us from one of you. A Philadelphia man wrote that his wife had joined what he called a cult that was controlling her mind. He was distraught, and he felt that he couldn't take on such a large organization on his own. Well, as it turns out, this was not the first we'd heard of the International Churches of Christ. Other viewers had written similar letters, so we decided to investigate.
And what we found in our search were former church members with dramatic stories of coercion and brainwashing and scare tactics. Is the International Churches of Christ a cult? Well, that depends upon whom you ask. There are thousands who say it has changed their lives for the better. See for yourself what John Stossel found, and you decide.
The International Churches of Christ. It's one of America's fastest growing churches. It started just 14 years ago outside Boston with only 30 members. Now there are more than 40,000, not just in Massachusetts, but here in New York and in dozens of cities all over the world. Every week, hundreds of new members are baptized.
Amen. Well, we're just so very, very thankful for this moment, just to be able to see Marcos say goodbye to his old life and just being born again into the water and the Spirit.
Many members say the church has saved their lives.
I am a member and a minister and a Christian in the Church of Christ because I think if I wasn't, I'd go to hell.
And it changed my life so much that, yes, I'm compelled to teach other people what I've learned.
We believe that the words spoken today are going to be from God's words.
Kip McKean's the church's founder and driving force. In 1979, some members of the more mainline Church of Christ asked the unordained but charismatic 25-year-old to be their leader. McKean did much more than just revive their flagging congregation.
I really believe this is just the beginning. Amen?
McKean and his small group broke away from the Church of Christ and started their own church, the International Churches of Christ. They teach that the Bible is literally true, and that in every situation a person should do exactly what Jesus would have done.
That's why you're here, to be influenced, to be like Jesus, to imitate those who are like Jesus.
Their dream is to, in one generation, reach out to every person in the world. They feel they must do this because if the rest of us do not live their way, then we are condemned to hell.
There is no other way to be saved. I'm happy to give the information to you. That's the purpose of the church.
The reason we decided to look into this group is that we heard from other people who said, this is not a church, it's a cult trying to control minds.
These are people who are supposed to be representing Jesus Christ. This is disgusting.
It's not a religious group that uses mind control, but it's a mind control group that uses religion.
We heard frightening stories from dozens and dozens of people who've left the International Churches of Christ. They say they feel exploited and lucky to have escaped with their minds and their lives.
God, how could you use my desire to serve you to do this to me? How could you let someone rape me spiritually like this?
The church says you're a small group of disgruntled people. We shouldn't listen to you.
It's a very large group.
It's a very large
Very, very large.
In fact, in the last 5.5 years, for every 3 people who joined the church, 2 others dropped out. Some feel financially ripped off.
I'm angry that I was duped, that I was tricked.
Holly Winkler belonged to the Philadelphia church.
You gave them a lot of money.
I did give them a lot of money.
More than $200,000 in 3 years.
And I don't even know where that money went. If it brought more people into the cult, I'd feel horrible about that, which is what I think it did.
Church leaders say they ask only 12 or 13% of members' income. But some ex-members say the church asks for much more. And even if you don't have much money, the church still wants you to give.
I said, I don't have a job. They said, don't you have any faith? I said, well. They said, do you have a credit card? I said, yes. And they said, well, that's something that God gave you, your credit card. And I said, oh, you want me to put it on the credit card? I put $600 on my credit card to give to them when I didn't have a job. They said that God would curse me if I didn't.
New members are taught that the way to become more like Jesus is to follow a disciple, a more senior church member who will counsel you about most everything. Critics say this is the most dangerous part of the system. They say disciplers tell members what to think, what they should and shouldn't read, what jobs to take. Sometimes they even arrange marriages. Kyle Yancey says church leaders ordered him not to go steady with his girlfriend. He taped one of the calls.
The Bible says, submit to your leaders and obey them. It's not just about dating here. It's about your attitude in general. Obey.
Why would members want to submit to this?
I was very lonely. I didn't have that many friends, and my mother brought me to the church service, and I wasn't.
Nancy Cohn of Bedford, Massachusetts, was only 12 when she joined the church.
And there were a lot of young kids that were very friendly and invited me over their house, and that's just what I wanted to do, is go over their house. And I thought they really wanted, wow, these people really like me, and they want to be my friends.
It's a recruiting technique called love bombing, say the ex-members who demonstrated.
You know what? One of my friends already had this class last year, and, we're going to get together and study for a while. Do you want to come over to my place?
I heard you're playing volleyball in a tournament next week. That's really cool because we always play volleyball at our Bible talks.
Oh, you should come over. We have such a good time together. And you
don't want to leave because everybody loves to be treated like that.
But once you're in the church, you must recruit other members. Leaders tell you, talk to 20 strangers today, or 40, or 60. Bring them in.
It's not a church. It's just not. It's a sales organization.
Mm-hmm.
And every day you go out and you got to pump out sales. And the pressure of that is incredible. And you're just trying to get one person. God, I just got to get one person in here. Come on. Because that's how they're judging.
When Nancy could not persuade other children to come to her church, leaders told her,
you have something wrong with you. You're not close to God. And they said, you need to beg them. Tell them that this is a life and death matter. Even if they say no, beg them until they say yes.
She tried, but when she couldn't recruit anyone else, church leaders told her that she and her family would burn in hell.
I can go to sleep at night wondering if I woke up the next morning if my mother would be dead or my father would be dead and they'd be in hell. That's what they told me. Your parents are going to hell and you're responsible for their souls. And that was a real big responsibility for someone who was only 14 years old. And I couldn't take it anymore. I felt like I was going to crack.
Nancy told the church she was leaving. They warned her not to go.
They said that I was to become a prostitute, They said, you know, God's going to destroy your life. He may even take your physical life away from you. And I kept saying, no. I kept trying to deny it, but they kept yelling at me. 2 people on both of my sides telling me, no, this is going to happen. And I just wanted to escape so bad. I took a knife, and I was scratching my wrist back and forth until it started to bleed. I felt that was the only way to escape them was to kill myself.
She was hospitalized for a month. She says being in the hospital and not being allowed to take church leaders' phone calls was the only thing that allowed her to escape the church.
And they basically told me, if you don't forgive your sins and join us, then you will be going to hell.
It took nearly killing herself for Cindy Galinas of New Hampshire to get out of the church. She says church leaders told her her family and her boyfriend were evil.
Jim, I used to tell you things about these people, and they turn around and say I was the bad person.
Yeah, they told me that it's just the devil possessing my boyfriend, possessing my family, the devil doing that. I better get away from them right away. Come live with them.
Cindy couldn't take the pressure. She broke down. She began to think she was Jesus.
I'm Jesus. I sat on his right side. That's all she kept saying, that she was Jesus. See, it's only been a couple days. She was Jesus. For I am Jesus, I command you. Follow me. Come to the window, see the light.
She tried to jump out the window.
And it was total chaos. And I was trying to get out the window. I'm just trying to save you guys. I'm just trying. And I kept thinking my sister Chris would bring me the water to drink, so I would have my last sip, so we could all be raised to go to heaven.
I don't know what they did to her. I couldn't believe it.
Her brother-in-law was amazed that the church could change someone so quickly.
It's incredible. The whole thing is incredible. In a 2-month period, that somebody that's so nice and so gentle and so loving could all of a sudden just completely lose it. What were you hoping from this group?
They're hoping to win the world for the Lord.
Meaning you were going to go out and convert as many people as you could.
Right. They would train us, and we'd be the best we could be for God.
Vicky Spar was already very religious when she heard about the church. She and her husband were so impressed by how closely this church followed the teachings of Christ that they left their home to join.
So it was worth leaving Maryland to go to Boston just for that?
Yes.
But eventually, she and her husband, Chris, found the church's demands overwhelming.
My disciple would map out from 5 o'clock in the morning till midnight every night what I would do each week. And then we'd go back over it. Did I do these things? Was I able to complete them?
Things got worse when her father had a stroke.
I was very close to my father. He called me from the hospital. He said, you need to come home. You need to be here. And it came back down to, Ricky shouldn't go. And if I didn't go along with it, that I'd be jeopardizing my soul again. So I didn't go.
Her father died 2 months later. She never saw him alive again.
Should have been home. I got really angry with myself, and I said, there's something big time wrong here. Very wrong.
And Chris felt the same way.
Yes. If the process to get to heaven is going to be this difficult, I give up. I quit. I'd rather go to hell.
It was downhill from there. A few years later, she says, Chris lost all hope.
He said, honey, we're walking dead men, aren't we? And I said, yeah, baby, we are.
Then, the next day,
I heard a noise from the bedroom, and I got up, and I stepped out of the door, and I tripped over him. He had hung himself on a crossbeam. Everything that he had lived for all those years was gone. The dreams are gone. The hopes were gone.
He's gone to hell.
Yeah. I miss him a lot. I know why he died. I know how he felt. And I feel that way too.
Why did he die?
Hopeless.
The Boston church took your hope away?
It destroyed our faith in God.
Well, how can this happen? And is it condoned by the church? We try to get some answers. And when we come back, the other side of the story. John Stossel gives the church leadership a chance to explain. Stay with us.
Well, you've heard the stories of some former members of the International Churches of Christ. They joined the church for love. They left it in fear. How does that church respond to these stories? Well, you'll hear their point of view from a church spokesman. But first, as John's investigation continues, former church leaders show how it was done, the pressure tactics, the psychological abuse.
What I think is the real challenge is to begin again.
Because Vicky Spar was suicidal, she contacted Rick Bauer. Bauer once was a church leader. Now he counsels people who've left the church. Church members told Vicky, don't talk to him and don't read what he's written.
And I didn't read it because I believed it was spiritual pornography, and I was told that that's what that kind of material was.
It's only when you get behind the other side of the curtain that you realize just how evil and how deceitful the whole system is.
Bauer says it's church policy to encourage new members to confess past sins to church leaders. The new members assume their confessions will be kept confidential. But Rick showed us a list that was made containing such confidential information. A list which was then passed on to leadership. Included are things like, recently was unfaithful, has lesbian background with Coast Guard woman, pre-marriage abortion, abused sexually by father. Former church leaders say confidential information like this is routinely passed among church leaders who sometimes use it to break reluctant members.
And they would tell me, perhaps you had a problem with drinking, or perhaps you were abusive to your wife or your child or something like that. And I would get in there with the Bible and get in your face and say, Stossel, you're a sinner. I bet you're the kind of person that would even beat his child. How dare you do that? How can you stand at the foot of the cross of Jesus and be that kind of person? I can't believe it. And you're not reacting, John. That's the problem, too. You're not broken. You're not really wailing. I think you need to write down all your sins that you've ever committed in all your life. And we need to go over that list.
The demands come from the Bible.
That's right.
Rick's wife, Sarah, was a church leader, too.
And we've talked about this before. This keeps coming up for you.
Often teams of disciples would break you down.
John, you're so prideful. I mean, you won't even listen to her. She has the words of God.
Sarah and Rick say that over 4 years, they did this to hundreds of disciples.
If you leave this group, your wife could leave you. Things will happen, John. You walk away from God, you'll have nothing.
I don't know how you can go on living. I really don't know how you can go on living.
It's like a dog returning to its vomit. And if you leave this church, that's what you're doing.
In the vomit, John.
I don't think you represent the Bible.
I'm just telling you what's in the scriptures,
This is the
John.
movement of God. This is the church. It's either the Boston movement or hell. And you've got to decide.
Why will people believe that?
That's the only source of reality they have surrendered to. Be a good disciple. Be teachable. Be obedient. Trust. If you don't trust your discipler, you don't trust God.
And why would they want to brainwash you?
They want to be able to control your behavior. They want to be able to make you pliable to whatever the group wants you to do. They want to be able to have an army of thousands and thousands of people who'll do whatever Kip McKean says.
It's so exciting.
Kip McKean would not agree to talk to us. He said Church of Christ elder Al Baird would speak for the church.
People say you control people's minds.
Absolutely, we don't believe that we control people's minds. God is a God of love, and he wants people to love him. You can't make somebody love.
It's not church policy to break people?
To break people, to force them to do something against their will? Absolutely not. What we try to do is persuade people to do what Jesus would want them to do, but not in terms of beating on people, forcing them to do what they want to do.
Totally foreign to you. You know,
I would totally teach against that. Again,
Baird denied most everything the critic said. For example, he says disciples' confessions aren't passed around.
Do you keep these confessions confidential?
I absolutely keep them confidential, and I teach that they should be kept confidential.
Then what about this sin list that's passed around?
I don't know of a sin list show me a sin list that gets passed around by leaders of the church.
Okay. You haven't seen this?
I'm not familiar with this. If this exists, this is totally wrong. And if I found out that someone did this, this could even be grounds for their dismissal.
You haven't seen something like this
I absolutely have not seen this.
But we hear stories about people being broken by confrontational interviews, their secrets thrown at them until they break. Doesn't happen.
I would never say something never happens. I mean, when you're dealing with 70,000 people, it'd be naive to say nothing never happens.
It's not.
But I can tell you,
practice
I
to
can
break
tell you,
people.
it is not what the leadership approves of in doing anything that Jesus wouldn't do.
Yet former church leaders kept telling us breaking people is policy. Seclusion is one technique.
You'd hold people in a basement for 2 weeks?
Okay, I was on the staff when that took place.
And you thought that that was okay? My teacher.
Scripture.
There's lots of scriptures, and you're always being told this is how you deal with sin. You get people to see it until they're broken.
Members submit to this to try to please God.
You held people for 2 weeks with no food?
We would make them fast. Yeah. And it
For
was
2 weeks?
Sure.
Mm-hmm. I did for 10 days when I was living with her.
And people would start to believe better then.
Oh gosh.
You break down.
It doesn't make any sense, even if we could, mind control someone to do that, because God creates us with free will and wants us to love Him with free will. So it would defeat the purposes of God to even try that.
So why do so many people say you do?
Well, I think it's not so many people that do. I think there are people that believe that we do. I think I can produce many more people that believe that we don't.
And he did. After I interviewed him, he gave this memo to church members. It says 2020 is drawing a very negative picture of the church, and therefore it would be good if church members wrote 2020 and told how the church had changed their lives. 4,000 people did, detailed and passionate letters. Before I became a Christian, I was involved in alcohol, promiscuity, prostitution, and much, much more. Now I'm changing every day, becoming a more godly woman. This young man writes, "It was the best thing that ever happened to me. I don't go out and get drunk anymore. I'm no longer controlled by my lust. I've never loved my parents more than I do now." This pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds says his life was immoral until he found God through the church. The letters are impressive, yet we still kept hearing horror stories. Perhaps the most disturbing criticism is that some church leaders so terrorize members that some feel they've failed God, and therefore life is no longer worth living.
Many of you have either tried to kill yourself or spent a lot of time considering suicide.
I have, and still do. Once I got involved in this church, I became very suicidal within the church. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor in my apartment where I lived with 5 other girls with a straight razor in my hand, thinking about dying because I wasn't good enough for God and I couldn't pull it together and get it right.
They told me that suicide was from God.
Oh, wow.
They said that a lot of times that was what God would use.
You're aware that some ex-members have tried to kill themselves, and some have killed themselves.
I am aware that, to the best of my knowledge, of the people that I'm aware of, our statistics are far, far, far lower than the national statistics. Now, obviously, anybody killing themselves is terrible. But the situation that I know of, and I know of only one in the United States, the mother said the church had nothing to do with. In fact, the church had helped her son, and she was thankful for what the church had done. He had been suicidal before he ever became a part of the church.
The mother says you're lying. She hates the church. You got your hooks into her son.
Well, if she's now saying that, she has changed in the last 2 years. But certainly, I mean, those were the things that were said at the time that this happened. Things like this are definitely isolated things.
Then why does the Cult Awareness Network say they get more complaints about your church than any other except Scientology and Satanism?
I think one reason they probably get the complaints is because we're very rapidly growing. We're one one of the most rapid growing churches in the world.
Well, I can see why people are confused, because there are so many people who say that this did change their lives. But what it does show, John, is the urgent need that people have, not just to find faith, but to have someone tell them what to do in their lives.
True, and the enormous benefit many members get from being told, who say they are so much happier now and more moral, and how good this has been for them. And many times preparing this, listening to both sides, I didn't know what to believe.
I know there is a percentage of people who have a deep need in that direction, but I'm surprised that so many college students are